I walked into that dinner, shook her hand, and with 5 words I ended a game that had been running for years. She never texted him again. He never understood why. And I never had to raise my voice, issue an ultimatum, cry in a bathroom, or beg a single person to choose me. Let me take you back to where this started. I was 37 years old and stepping back into the dating world after 3 years of grief. My husband had passed away. 3 years of silence where there used to be noise. 3 years of learning to exist as just me again, and when I finally felt ready, truly ready, I took a breath and walked into a world I had not been part of since I was 19 years old. I told myself it would be different now. More honest, more mature. I expected to meet people who knew what they wanted, who said what they meant, who had moved past the shallow performances of their 20s. I expected depth. What I found instead was a textbook performance of one of the oldest games in existence, dressed up in the costume of friendship, and sold to me like something I was just supposed to accept without question. But here is what they never account for. When you have lost something real, genuinely, devastatingly real, you develop a radar for everything that is not. And when a woman who has grieved and healed and rebuilt herself from scratch walks into your little performance, she does not play along, she ends it. This is the story of exactly how I did that. After 3 years, the silence of a house that used to hold 2 people becomes something you make peace with. Not because it stops hurting, it doesn't, not entirely, but because you learn to carry it differently. Grief strips everything down to what actually matters. And when you come out the other side of it, you carry a kind of clarity that most people don't earn until much later in life, if they earn it at all. I had spent those 3 years rebuilding myself from the inside out, reading more, working more, learning what my own company felt like without the architecture of a marriage built around me, learning to enjoy a Saturday morning alone and actually mean it, not just endure it. And somewhere in that slow, quiet work of reconstruction, I had arrived at something that felt like readiness. Not urgency. Not loneliness chasing its own tail. Just readiness. The kind where you wake up one morning and realize you still have things to give, and you would like to give them again, so I started dating. I had not done this since I was 19. The landscape had changed in ways I had to learn quickly, the apps, the profiles, the particular ritual of presenting yourself in the most appealing possible snapshot before a stranger swipes a judgment. I expected awkwardness. I expected rust. I expected to feel like someone who had missed several chapters of a book that everyone else had been reading for years. What I did not expect was to feel like the only adult in the room. But I am getting ahead of myself. Because before any of that, before the games and the phone and the smirks and the calls, there was a man I actually liked. And that part matters. Because you cannot understand what I eventually did unless you understand exactly what I was willing to walk away from. He was charming in a quiet way. Not the loud, theatrical kind of charming that announces itself the moment someone walks into a room. More like the kind you discover in increments. A dry sense of humor that caught you off guard. A way of listening that made you feel like what you were saying genuinely mattered. Small details about things you had mentioned in passing that he somehow still remembered 3 weeks later. Our first few dates were easy. Genuinely, surprisingly easy. Comfortable in a way I had not expected, given how long I had been off the market. We went to dinner. Walked the city, talked about books and work and travel and the future-adjacent conversations that people have when they are testing the waters. He made me laugh, and I had forgotten, I had actually, genuinely forgotten, what it felt like to sit across from someone new and feel that particular warmth, that flicker of anticipation when your phone lights up with their name. I was careful not to get swept away. I had been careful in general since I started dating again, measured, deliberate, protective of the peace I had worked hard to build. But I allowed myself to feel it, to let the fact that I liked him be a real and uncomplicated thing without immediately bracing for the other shoe. And for a while, a good, easy while, there was no other shoe. Just 2 people enjoying each other's company, quietly figuring out if something worth pursuing was forming between them. I want you to hold on to that version of him, the attentive one, the one who showed up and listened and made the evenings feel effortless. Hold on to it, because what was about to enter the picture was already there, operating in the background, waiting for exactly the right moment. Little did I know, it had been running long before I arrived, and the moment things started to feel serious, it activated right on schedule. The first few times I noticed it, I told myself it was nothing. A buzz here, a glance down, a small smile, and a quick response. We all have lives outside of a date. We all have group chats that go off at inconvenient moments. I was not, and am not, the kind of woman who expects a man to silence his entire social world the moment he sits across from her. That has never been who I am, but I started noticing patterns. The buzzing was not random. It had rhythm, the particular rhythm of someone who knows your schedule, and the smile that followed it was not the polite, embarrassed smile of someone whose phone has interrupted something important. It was a smirk, the kind that lives on the face of a person quietly enjoying being wanted, the kind that carries weight that has no business being at your table with someone else. One evening I asked, calmly and without any particular edge, whether everything was all right. He laughed. Actually laughed, relaxed, easy, completely unbothered. He said it was his friend, that she was teasing him about being on a date. His friend. And then, before I could fully register what he had just told me, he added that she was one of his best friends. Said it like the word best was going to smooth something over. And then, and this is the part that told me everything I needed to know, he mentioned, almost in passing, that women he had dated in the past had apparently had issues with this particular friendship. Are we really still doing this? In our late 30s? The preemptive warning. The permission slip he was writing for himself before I'd even asked for an explanation. I said nothing, but I noted everything. Because the man who volunteers that information without being asked is not giving you context. He is establishing the terms under which you are expected to behave. I want to be precise about what I felt in that moment because precision matters here. I did not feel jealous. I want to be absolutely clear about that. Jealousy requires feeling threatened, like something you value is in danger of being taken away, and I did not feel threatened. I felt something much colder, much more diagnostic. I felt dry. Completely, irreversibly, bone dry. The kind of dryness that is the body's honest and immediate response to the recognition that something beneath the surface is deeply unappealing, not just in what he said, but in the practiced, comfortable way he said it. This man had a pattern. He had told me so himself. Multiple women before me had taken issue with the exact same behavior, and his response to that information was not reflection. It was not self-examination. It was a preemptive warning to me, as if the problem was the women who objected, not the behavior that kept prompting their objection. What kind of person presents that information and doesn't hear it as a warning about themselves? I filed it quietly away. The weeks that followed were a slow, steady accumulation of evidence. The texts continued every single time we went out. Then the calls began, and the calls were something else entirely. One dinner, one single 2-hour dinner, she called 4 times. 4, and he answered every single one. And they spoke for approximately 20 minutes total while I sat across from him with my wine and my patience and my absolute, crystalline understanding of exactly what I was watching. He apologized that evening. Looked genuinely embarrassed, which I noted as a minor point in his favor. I asked him, calmly and without any edge, how he managed his daily life if they spoke this constantly. He got quiet, said it was not usually like this. No, it was not. It was only like this when he was getting serious about someone else, and I was beginning to understand why. Let me pause here, because I think it is important to name clearly what was actually happening, not dramatically, not accusatorially, but with the precise and unsentimental clarity that you can only bring to a situation when you have been through enough life to recognize the architecture of things before they fully show themselves. This woman, his best friend, had a system. Whether she was conscious of it or not is almost beside the point, because the mechanism operated identically regardless of her intentions. She existed in the background of his life in a state of carefully maintained unavailability, close enough to matter, distant enough to be safe, and the moment he began developing real feelings for someone else, she activated. Texts, calls, attention, presence, just enough to keep the door from closing all the way. Can you see the shape of what I was looking at by now? And he let it happen. He welcomed it. He wore it on his face like a man quietly, privately thrilled that someone cared enough to interrupt his evenings. I had watched this pattern in other people's lives before, not in my own marriage, which had been a completely different kind of story, but in the stories of people around me. The person you love from a safe distance. The one who is always almost available, who materializes with perfect timing the moment you are genuinely moving on, and who disappears back into the middle distance the moment you are fully present with them instead of waiting for them. It is a particular kind of cruelty. And the most devastating part is that neither person inside the dynamic usually knows they are living in it. He had convinced himself it was simply closeness, that this was just how they were, how they had always been. That the parade of women before me, who had grown frustrated and drawn lines and ultimately walked away, had simply been unable to handle a man with a close female friend. He had no idea that the problem wasn't the women. The problem had his number saved, and the night that was about to change everything was coming faster than he knew. The invitation came on a Friday evening. He wanted me to meet his friends. A group dinner, casual, easy, no pressure. And by any normal measuring stick, this was a meaningful gesture. People invite you to meet their friends when they are serious about you, when they want their worlds to begin to overlap in the small, deliberate way that signals something is forming. I accepted. And I was, let me be honest, very curious about one person in particular. But you might be wondering, did I walk into that room with a plan? Did I rehearse lines on the drive over? Did I arrive carrying some carefully constructed strategy? Not exactly. What I had was something quieter and more durable than a plan. I had clarity. 3 years of grief will give you that, a complete inability to waste time and energy on things that do not matter, and a very clean sense of what does. I was not angry. I was not hurt in the desperate, destabilizing way. I was simply clear about what I was looking at, clear about what I was and was not willing to become, and then she walked in. She was first to arrive, first to jump up and cross the room. She wrapped her arms around him with a hug that lasted a few seconds longer than it needed to, the kind that carries its own argument. She was warm. She was vivacious. Magnetic in the specific way of someone who has learned, consciously or not, how to make their presence feel like a gift. And she was kind to me. Genuinely kind, welcoming, and easy, the kind of social grace that reads as effortless because it has been practiced so long it has become instinct. In a genuinely different universe, under genuinely different circumstances, I think we actually could have been friends. Which is exactly why what I was about to say was going to land so precisely, because she had absolutely no idea who she was sitting across from. She offered to show me around the city. Said she knew all the best spots, the hidden places, the kind of restaurants you only find if someone takes you there by the hand. And in that easy way new acquaintances fall into conversation, she started asking about us, how things were going, what I thought of him. I paused, just a breath, one quiet moment of stillness, and then I told her the truth. I said I was not looking for anything serious. Simply, plainly, without drama, without a loaded glance across the table, without any performance at all. Just a woman offering an honest update to a friendly new acquaintance over the noise of a restaurant dinner. I told her he was fun, that I enjoyed spending time with him, but that I did not see this going anywhere in the long run. I was not in the market for a future right now, just something warm and easy and undemanding for the present. No strings, no destination, no rush. And then I watched her face. I want you to understand what happened to her expression in that moment because it is the most honest thing I witnessed all evening. It shifted. Not dramatically, she was far too socially composed for anything dramatic. But there was a micro-recalibration, the kind that only registers if you are watching for it. A brief, involuntary movement behind the eyes. The specific look of a person running arithmetic they had not expected to run. Because in that moment, she was doing the math. She was thinking about every text she had sent, every call, every carefully timed interruption, every moment of activated, urgent presence during his dates with me. She was measuring all of that energy against what I had just told her, that none of it had been necessary. That the thing she had been quietly, consistently disrupting was never a serious threat to begin with. She had been in invisible competition with a woman who had already decided not to compete. The embarrassment moved across her face like a quiet wave. She changed the subject smoothly, the way only people with real social intelligence can. But I had seen it, and I knew exactly what would happen next. Here is what I want you to understand about what happened next. I did nothing else. I did not pull him aside after dinner and explain what I had done. I did not send a follow-up message. I did not look for confirmation or position myself near a window to watch the ripples spread. I went home, poured a drink, and simply waited, because I already knew with complete, quiet certainty what was going to happen, and it happened exactly as I knew it would. His phone went silent. Within days of that dinner, the calls stopped. The texts stopped. The constant, relentless, surgically timed buzz that had become the background noise of every single moment we spent together simply ceased. The first evening we went out after that night, I noticed the quiet almost immediately. The absence of her presence, her digital, persistent, perfectly timed presence, sat between us like something that needed to be named and wasn't going to be. He noticed it too. I could read it in him, something slightly off in his usual ease, something subdued and slightly searching in the way he moved through the evening. The confidence he had always carried was still there, but muted, like a man who had reached for something familiar and found the shelf unexpectedly empty. I mentioned the quiet eventually. Just offhandedly, the way you might remark on a change in the weather. He looked genuinely puzzled, said she was probably just busy, and then, and this is the detail I will remember, he smiled. A small, practiced, private smile, said she was like that she disappeared sometimes, that this was just how she was. Yes, she disappears when the situation no longer serves her. She disappears when you are available to her again instead of unavailable because you belong to someone else. I did not say it. I thought it so clearly it almost felt like sound in the room between us. And somewhere beneath that practiced smile, I believe some portion of him felt it too, even if he could never let himself fully arrive at the thought. He had no idea I had already had the only conversation that mattered. He never would. There is a particular kind of sadness that comes with watching someone love a person who will never love them back in the same way. Not a dramatic sadness, not the kind that requires intervention or a long, difficult conversation. Just a quiet, aching recognition of something true and painful and entirely beyond your power to fix for someone else. He had feelings for her. I was as certain of that as I was certain of anything about him. Real feelings, buried under years of proximity and a carefully constructed narrative, not quite acknowledged, not quite released. She held a piece of him that he had probably never consciously handed over, and she knew how to hold it in exactly the right way. Loosely enough that he could maintain the comfortable fiction of moving on. Firmly enough that the string snapped taught the precise moment he got genuinely close to someone else. The women before me who had grown frustrated, who had drawn lines, who had asked him to choose, who had ultimately walked away at some cost to themselves, they had not lost. They had recognized the shape of the maze they were standing in and decided to walk out of it. I understood them completely. I wished I could have thanked every single one of them. I thought about telling him what I saw. I had the words for it. I had the clarity, but I already knew how that conversation would land. A man like him, not a bad man, not a cruel man, just a profoundly blind one, would have heard jealousy instead of insight, would have received my clarity as a woman threatened by his friendship, performing the exact same tired script as the women before me. He would have reconstructed my honesty into a motive that made more sense to him than the truth ever could. Some people have to find their own way to certain truths, and some truths take years and a long, particular silence to fully arrive at. I wished him well. I genuinely meant it, and then I let the whole beautiful, sad, unnecessary thing go. I think about that dinner sometimes, the precise shift in her expression when she ran the numbers, the quiet that settled over his phone in the days that followed, the small, private, invisible implosion of a dynamic that had probably been running for years, consuming him and the women who came before me long before I ever stepped into the picture. I did not win anything. I want to be very clear about that. There was no trophy, no confrontation, no moment where I finally said everything I had been thinking and watched someone crumble. There was just a woman who had been through enough life to know what is real and what is performance, and who chose, quietly and without ceremony, to refuse the performance. And maybe that is the thing worth carrying from this story. Not every act of self-respect looks dramatic. Not every act of justice announces itself with fire. Sometimes it looks like a woman who has already lost something genuinely devastating, sitting across from a stranger at a dinner table, offering the single most disarming weapon in any game. The truth. She thought she was welcoming his new girlfriend. She had no idea she was sitting across from the person who was about to dissolve the entire arrangement, not out of revenge, not out of malice, but simply by refusing to be a piece in a game she had never agreed to play. He will find his way eventually, or he will not, but he will do it without me quietly becoming another name in the long list of women who could not handle the friendship. Without me waiting, hoping, adjusting, diminishing myself to fit into a space that was never actually cleared for me. The phone went quiet. I went home, and the only energy I spent after that was on myself. That is cold karma. It does not always arrive as fire. Sometimes it arrives as 5 honest words in the right room at the right moment. And sometimes silence, the sudden, total, inexplicable silence that follows, is the most devastating thing of all. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever chosen, quietly and deliberately, to walk out of a game rather than play it, drop a like and subscribe. Cold karma is here every single day. And I promise you, The next story is worth staying for.